Despite being in a retool, Doug Armstrong and the St. Louis Blues have made it clear that they still want to be competitive next season and beyond. So today, Alec and I are going to break down who we think could make or break that goal in the 2024-25 season. All that and more on this episode of Note News. So we're still in the thick of the off season here. So today, as we've got 2 months to go, right, till the season starts, almost exactly. So we figured it would be a good time to start breaking down who the biggest variables, some of the most important people and players could be for this upcoming season. And first of all, before we get started, if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're almost at 100 subscribers, so that's pretty exciting. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can give us a 5-star rating there. We really appreciate it. And we're also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Note News Pod if you want to follow along with us there. So first of all, hi, Alec. How you doing?
Doing great. Off season's in the full swing of things, like you said, so missing hockey, but there's other sports content to keep me entertained and sated until the real good stuff begins.
There you go. There's Olympics going. We mentioned that last week.
It's
the Olympics are fun.
30% as good as hockey, but it's there.
It's there. So today we're talking about X factors is sort of the title, the fancy term we're using today. So what do we mean by X factors? So we're gonna sort of go back and forth discussing some players and people that we see as big variables for the upcoming season. So we're not necessarily predicting that these players or these people are gonna have huge seasons, big years. That's not what we're predicting necessarily. We're just saying that the Blues season and sort of how they fare in the playoff race could hinge on what these players are able to accomplish. So for example, if player number one that John names, does what he thinks should be done, then maybe that could really push the Blues over the line. If not, then the Blues might have a tougher time. So that's sort of what we're talking about here. So why don't we get into it? I'll start with one of mine that I mentioned on a previous episode sort of briefly when we were talking about the state of the defense is Justin Faulk. So the reason I think he's a big X factor, and we talked about it a little bit on that episode, but we can really get into it here. The reason I see him as a big X factor is mainly to do with it mainly has to do with the Torrey Krug injury, right? So we're assuming that Torrey Krug's probably going to miss the season. They said he'll be reevaluated soon. I don't think any more news has come out yet about that. But knowing us, it's probably going to come out as soon as this episode comes out. But Torrey Krug last season was the leader in points among all Blues defensemen. He had 39 points between 4 goals and 35 assists. And number 2 on the defense was Justin Faulk with 2 goals and 28 assists, 30 points. So I really think in Torrey Krug's absence, I know he's not an offensive powerhouse, but like I just said, he led the defense in points. So offensively, someone needs to step up and fill that void. I recently wrote an article on Bleeding Blue about this, but I think Justin Faulk is sort of one of the main candidates to do that. Last season, he scored 2 goals, and that was literally his career low for goals scored. The previous 2 seasons, 22-23, he had 11 goals. Before that, 16 goals. His career high came in 2016-17 with 17 goals. But in terms of point production, last season, 22-23 was a career high, 50 points. And so I don't think it's out of the question that he could take another step forward. And I think he has to if we want to see some offensive production from the defense. So what do you think about Justin Faulk, Alec?
Yeah, I like that answer. I agree that it's kind of a really important one to monitor as the season goes on. And he's had a pretty good trajectory of his past 3 years, as you said. Not only in the past 2 seasons before last, He scored 47 and 50 points, and then last year only put up 30 points, but was injured for a lot of it, so still on pace somewhat. Another thing that's really promising about Faulk's game that you can kind of predict is maybe a more stable growth than some random variants is most of those points came at even strength. So in both 21-22 and then following season, he had 40 points at even strength, which was almost all of his production. Last year had 22 points of his total mark. So, it's still you hope to see more from him um, on the power play this year. Presumably, he will be that quarterback at least on the second unit. Probably Pareko will get one of the other jobs too. But yeah, I mean, someone on the blue line, as you said, has to step up, and I agree that I think it should be Faulk. I like your analysis.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think, some other candidates, we don't have to get into these guys specifically, but I mentioned the article that I wrote. Some other candidates are, Colton Pareko, who led the defense in goals scored last year, and then Scott Perunovich, who with some growth projected as a young player, maybe he could step up as well. So somebody has to if they want to be competitive, like you said. So who do you want to talk about? So who's your first X factor that you want to get into?
I would say, kind of for a similar role, I think a really big variance point of this season could be Brandon Saad's play. So last year on the team, he was 5th in points, and really came in as a goal scorer, also registering his 5th in goals, tied for 4th technically. And Saad's a guy that really the season could change based on his play alone for a number of ways. I'll start with maybe the poor range of outcomes and kind of work up to it. So if he plays poorly, then our depth scoring is that much weaker, and it's going to get really hard for the team to supplement him. If the team plays poorly, and depending on his play, Saad's probably a piece that could be moved at the trade deadline, and depending on his play, you could get a really good return for it. Or if he doesn't, then you're kind of selling low on a really valuable asset. What I think is more likely is that he still continues his goal scoring production, but maybe those assist numbers could fall off, and playing down the depth chart as we see more guys take his place in young players. Hopefully, maybe his overall points fall off, but he's still scoring goals, which is a valuable player. Saad's been a big contributor on special teams, so he kind of touches every part of the Blues game, or a lot of it at least. He's okay defensively, I'd say, maybe a little below average. So I'm not going to say I guess, doesn't have as much of an effect on the defensive game, because I don't think he's a liability entirely. But so Saad's a player I'm going to be monitoring very closely. I guess the grand conclusion with all of this is the depth scoring can probably be, or Saad's play could be viewed as perhaps a microcosm of the depth scoring, and you can't always say that with one guy, and probably you still can't here, but I do think if you're trusting someone to be producing, it's going to be one of the veteran guys, and I think Saad is the leader there.
For sure, yeah, he's plays hard. He's a hardworking player for sure. One thing that's interesting, you mentioned maybe his assists will fall off. They sort of are on a downward trajectory. In 2021-22, his first season with St. Louis, he had 25 assists, which was sort of right in line with some of his earlier career norms. But since then, in 22-23, he had 18 assists, and then last season 16 assists. So it's sort of on a downward trajectory. So hopefully he can turn that around. I hope he has a really good start to the season, and then honestly, I hope he gets traded. I know he's been a solid producer for the Blues. He was one of those high level goal scorers that was so valuable for us last season. But I think they should take advantage of that value, and try to get some younger players for him. But I think that's a great one. Sort of in line with the scoring, I'll bring up my next one is Jordan Kyrou. Again, we've sort of stressed at length the importance of the scoring depth for the Blues. With their, what was it, 6 players that had 20 plus goals last season. That's a really solid number. But we've also stressed that what the Blues are missing is that high level goal scorer. We want someone to score 40, 50 goals. And really, take that step to lead the team as like the offensive, weapon. I think right now our best bet with the team as currently constructed is Jordan Kyrou. 31 goals last season, led the team, 37 goals the year before, so not far off from that 40-goal clip. If he can continue to progress, and I know people can be frustrated with him, we have a lot of expectations for him. If he can continue to progress slowly as he has over the years, and maybe one of these years, next season or the season after that, he can like take a big step and break that 40-goal barrier, and really become that that offensive weapon that the Blues are going to need if they want to compete. I think if he can take that step, the Blues will be set up pretty well, right? Like, if we're assuming similar production, which we can't always assume that, but if we assume that the other 20 plus goal scorers will continue to score in that range, Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, Jake Neighbors, if we assume, and I think it's safe to assume they'll be around that mark. And then we have Jordan Kyrou scoring a high level of goals, then that's huge, right? Like that's what the Blues are missing. So I think if he's able to take that step forward, that could really make the Blues season. If he stands pat and no one else steps forward, or even if he regresses, which would be unfortunate, then that could break the Blues season. So what do you think about Jordan Kyrou?
Yeah, I really like his ability and projection this year. I do truly think that we've seen only just a very standard, like linear growth from him.
Yeah.
So I see no reason why he can't get better and maybe hit that 40-goal plateau.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just throwing this out here for the sake of, I don't know, having a little fun. In his age 23 season, Matthew Tkachuk scored 16 goals in 56 games. Shortened season, weird stuff happened. Before that, he had put up 20 and 30 goal marks, around where Kyrou's at. The next season, in his age 24 season, Kyrou will be 25. And I don't think they're quite the same player, but anyways, in a full season's worth, scored 42 goals. The next season, first season on the Panthers, scored 40 goals. And that seems to be the level that he sort of settled at. Last year had a down year, but we all know he's a good player. So I'm not saying that Jordan Kyrou is Matthew Tkachuk, but you do see, even from some of the stars in the NHL, they really don't hit that level until about Kyrou's age. And so I think it's safe to say that we should expect a little more from Kyrou this season. And if he doesn't hit that, it's safe to say that it probably is a little bit of a disappointment given what he's being paid. So, yeah, I like that one.
Definitely. He's earning the money. I'm not giving up on him yet. Like you said, he's still young and could still really break through like that. I think he's still exciting. So I'm holding out hope that he'll be the star that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. I'll go next. So for my next X Factor, I think I want to talk about some of the young guys on this team and a lot of the rookie or second-year players. As we are in a retool period, we're expecting a lot from basically unproven commodities. We're trying to see what they could be. And I think the season could really overachieve if some of these guys step up, and if they just produce basically no production at all, then it's really might see a bit of a stagnation and perhaps a down year again. So who am I talking about? Well, I know guys like Bolduc is a big one. I think he could contribute on the power play. I'm not sure if he's slated to do that, but I still really like him there. I think he profiles really well on the wing as a power play shooter. Could Could also be guys like Kessel or Tucker on the defensive line. Tucker's played a couple seasons now as spot starts, but I'm not sure if he still broke his rookie status or not. But I think that the defense. Well, we all know that the defense needs a consistent presence, especially down the pairings. And I'm really hoping that Tucker or Kessel could step in and just be fine. Like, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying be a number one or even top pairing guy. Just be like, okay, I'm happy with you. I see that as a possibility. But also, they're rookies or they're young guys, so there's a chance that doesn't happen. And then I think last one I want to mention is, I guess two more. So perhaps some of our 2023 first round picks, guys like Stenberg, Lindstein, and Dvorsky, can they really impress and make the team, or will they continue in the minor leagues in their equivalents? I think probably the latter, but if they make the team, I think that's something that we can all get really excited about. But then I think the big one that probably you at home were waiting for me to talk about is Jimmy Snuggerud. Will he make the team this year? Yes. Spoilers reported by me. I do believe that they're going to get him NHL playing time this year. I would expect at least, and definitely enough to break that rookie eligibility. I don't know. I would kind of guess probably like half the season or so, maybe 30-something games. But Snuggerud is a guy that we're all really excited to see, is breaking records for Minnesota NCAA like franchise goal scorer. One of their best players ever in Minnesota. What are they? Golden Gophers, I think. College history. And we've talked about scoring depth. If he can come in as a rookie and score even like 15 goals in like 30, 40 games, I think that's something to be really excited about. Because you can really project such a high ceiling for this guy. He's 20 years old. So if he can come in, like I said, and put up like a fine goal scoring total and show some flashes, I mean, that's a player that you can really get excited for in the years coming when this retool period is over.
Yeah, that would be awesome. You got me excited for this kid. You specifically are just really excited about a lot of these young players, and it's making me excited about them. I really am looking forward to Snuggerud coming up and having an impact. It would be awesome if we could see Dvorsky in some effect on the Blues this season. But like you said, maybe not. And then, with like the Bolduc, Kessels, and Tuckers of the world, there's a lot hinging on these young players. This is probably, it could be argued that this is like the biggest X factor for the Blues next season, and definitely like projecting over, the next 2 or 3 seasons, it's definitely the biggest X factor. They're in a retool. They're so old. The Blues as a team are so old, and they just need to get younger. Their current core isn't getting it done in terms of being a Stanley Cup competitor. But if their young core, like you said, can take a step forward, then that's really gonna push them over the line, I think. So arguably the biggest X factor. It's a good one. The next one I'll say is probably kind of obvious. Jordan Binnington, I think, is a big one. It's been discussed a lot, but he is a huge reason why the Blues are even in it at the end of the season last year. With the state of the defense giving up so many chances and so many shots on goal, Jordan Binnington was saving the team. He was kind of putting the team on his back a lot of nights, and had a really good year. So I think it's really important that he, if the team wants to be successful, he puts up similar numbers, has a similar season, because let's be honest, the defense isn't all that improved. It's probably going to be a little bit similar defensively. Hopefully some of these, like, I don't know, P.O. Joseph, or I don't know, Ryan Suter, I guess. Hopefully they can help a little. But I think if the Blues want to be successful, Jordan Binnington is going to have to keep it up. I do want to mention, because I am a little bit heated about it, and I know this is a strife that is shared across Blues fandom, but I think Jordan Binnington is so underrated, and he had such a good year last year. I think he should have been a Vezina finalist. He was not. Let me just read to you real quick on the NHL, like their website, the NHL Network. Producers and analysts revealed a list of the top 10 current goalies. I'm just gonna go. I'll go from 10 down. All right, so 10, Linus Ullmark, Ottawa Senators. 9, Jose Saros, Predators. 8, Jake Ottinger, Dallas Stars. 7, Bobrovsky, Florida Panthers. 6, Thatcher Demko, Vancouver Canucks. 5, Ilya Sorokin, New York Islanders. 4, Jeremy Swayman, Boston Bruins. 3, Andrei Vasilevsky, Tampa Bay Lightning. 2, Connor Hellebuck, Winnipeg Jets. And number 1, Igor Shesterkin, New York Rangers. Like, where do you think Binnington should slot in? Because I think he should be on that list.
Yeah, I would say top 8 at least, like as a bare like minimum.
Right. I don't like.
I do think Bobrovsky's getting a lot of like recency hype.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Also, Demko has not played at the same level that he did like back in the late 2010s and in 2020 when he was just a monster. I think people are really like conflating team success with actual like goalie ability. Also, like the Boston Bruins have one of the best defensive, like just solid games all around.
Right.
Is it a product of their goalies being good, or is it their defense being good? Probably both. But like based on goalie ability alone, I mean, I don't know. Ullmark and Swayman are good. They're good. Don't get me wrong, but
Swayman more so, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like Ilya Sorokin. I know he's good, but he had like the highest, or like the lowest save percentage of his career last year. But yeah, like you said, a lot of this is just like the product of their teams being good, and maybe they're definitely a reason why. But I think he should be on this list. I think he's definitely top 10. Last season, he had the 5th highest goals saved above expected, behind Hellebuck, Demko, Anthony Stolarz. So he only played 27 games, but still, Jeremy Swayman, and then Binnington. So his goals saved above expected was 16.5, which is right in line with.
It's crazy.
Those 4 above him. Well, I guess
I think Hellebuck kind of broke 33.1.
Yes, yeah. I was gonna say. So
last year he was just like a monster.
Yeah, he was a little bit of an outlier there, but I mean, Binnington is a good goalie, and he has been for a while. Like I know his, he hasn't been as good as he was in like, the 2019 Cup run and all that, but like. Last season, I think, was one of his best, full seasons of his career. I think he should be getting a little more respect than he's gotten, and I think he's arguably the biggest X factor, or one of the biggest X factors for the Blues next season, if their defense continues to play like they did last season. So I think he's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. Binnington is kind of a buzzword around the NHL because. The Blues as a fan base don't get as much national recognition as like the Bruins or the Rangers or some of these other teams. Binnington had like 1 or 2 outbursts, I think, during that really bad 2023 season. And people just now hate on him when like there are so many other goalies like Georgiev or the Capitals. Oh man, it's escaping me. But like other goalies do this stuff.
Do you mean like Darcy Kemper?
Really had it. Yeah, Kemper. Yeah. Like other goalies have these, angry moments. It's just everyone likes to pick on Binnington, and it's so frustrating because you're right. He's not getting his due diligence, his credit as a player, and that's really not fair to him. He's going to be 31 this season, so it's kind of like this is kind of the sweet spot for goalies in like their aging curve to really like. Put the NHL on notice, and he has like statistically, and it's people will just rag on him and hate on him when he's like a really good teammate and really like loves to get his team fired up, and it gets me fired up. Like I love watching Binnington play. I will stand in his corner for a long time, unless he does something to really reverse that. But
yeah,
I don't know. I'm such a Binnington fan. As I said, probably the best Blues goalie in NHL or in franchise history. Excuse me. Check out last episode on that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm so with you. And if he can have just another great season, the Blues should be in an okay spot. And if he can even take that step, as I said, this is about the time when goalies turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could see a Vezina return to St. Louis.
Fingers crossed, man. Do you want to talk about the other goalie next?
Yeah, I think we can throw this discussion into. I would say it's probably in terms of all our talking points here, maybe the least like I don't know, the least with the one with the less of a huge implication. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But it still does have some effect on the season for sure. So as we all know, Joel Hofer had a really great season last year. Really great underlying metrics in his starts and pretty good just regular metrics in his starts. Someone that I think we're both really excited about. And if he can continue being a really good backup, then yeah, this tandem could be special.
Mm-hmm.
Had a 913 save percentage in 30 games started. 27 games started. Had a 15-12 record, 15-12-1, which is pretty good. All this stuff is really good for a backup. And so if Hofer essentially has the same season as he did last year, I feel really good about the Blues goaltending tandem. If a young, now 24-year-old goalie can step it up and take the next step to be a really special ascending goalie, then this goalie tandem is nothing short of elite, and will continue to, you and I both will pound the table for like, this might be the best goaltending tandem in the NHL. Like, that's the ceiling here.
Man. I think
and
it could be.
That's so exciting. I don't know the last time. I mean, there were some pretty good goalie performances. I think Jake Allen had a crazy year once as a backup to Brian Elliott, and maybe, that was probably a top 5 tandem. But like, this could be the number one by like a landslide, especially now that the Boston duo is broken up.
Yeah.
I don't know. But if Hofer regresses to being just like every other NHL backup, 890, 880 save percentage, and not as good of a record, then this team's going to suffer for it, because starters don't only start about 2/3 of the team's games, and if we can't really get a playable effort in net in the other third of the games, then it's going to be really hard for this team to be even above 500 points percentage. So
agreed.
But I don't think it's likely, but it is certainly in the realm of possibility, as he's such a young goalie.
For sure. Real quick on the Hofer discussion, in terms of goals saved above expected, while I've still got it pulled up, he's 17th last year overall with 10.3 goals saved above expected. Looking at like some names that he performed better than, you're looking at like let's see, Aiden Hill, Connor Ingram, Georgiev, who only had 5 goals saved above expected, Tristan Jarry, Stuart Skinner, Jake Ottinger. Like, in terms of that stat, Ilya Sorokin, like that's a pretty good stat to use to evaluate goalies. And he performed really well. Performed I think a little bit better than you'd expect a backup to perform. And if he can continue that, I think that would be huge, like you said. So, excuse me. So my last X factor, and this isn't a player, is Drew Bannister. And I think it's pretty obvious why. He's taking over as the legit head coach. He's not an interim anymore, and he's sort of a new face, right? We've only gotten, I guess, a little bit more than half a season of coaching from him. I think from what we saw, things like look pretty positive with him. He sort of helped turn the team around after a rough start. They were, they didn't make the playoffs, obviously, but they were right in the fight at the end, and I think he was a big reason why. I'll be interested to see sort of how team dynamics play out now that he's not interim. We mentioned it a little bit, I think, on a previous episode, but like when you see, I'm not an NHL player, obviously, and I don't know how they think, but I got to imagine that if you're like your coach is interim, he might not be around next year, so you might be a little more hesitant to like form that relationship. Spend your time, which is limited and valuable. Really getting to know that person, understanding how they operate as a coach. Um, I think I think that now that he's not interim anymore, those relationships will form in a more like legitimate way, and we'll really get to see sort of how his team dynamic operates now that he is the guy, he is the boss. And so I think that, if he's able to adapt to that change, if he's able to like adjust to being full-time head coach, and keeps the team on sort of a positive trajectory like he did last year, I think that could be huge, huge for the Blues, and could be a big reason why, they're in it next year, hopefully. With his, contract being 2 years, I don't think they're going to be, too afraid to let him go if things are going poorly. Um, Maybe next season would be a little premature to do that, but I think that if he's able to, like, while I'm thinking about it, if he's able to get the team to perform well in these next 2 years, then he could earn himself a bigger, maybe a longer contract once this current one is up in 2 years. So, anything you want to add on Drew Bannister?
Yeah, I mean, 30, 19, and 5 record speaks for himself. I think it's a big reason why he got that job.
Yeah.
And I think as we touched on in our first ever episode, if you want to go check that one out, you really saw a lot more of like a buy-in from the players, and all the reports so far from the camps of that everyone is super bought into Drew Bannister as head coach, and will definitely like put their best effort forward. And you saw like a lot of the older players, their deficiencies weren't quite as bad. But maybe that was just because the team was playing good. Maybe it was because of Bannister. But especially with the young players, you really saw them kind of fire up and get this team going. And as we brought up earlier, we're kind of hoping that the young forwards and young players can take the next step, and that's a big part of it, whether or not this Blues team is going to be successful. And Drew Bannister's got to be the guy to do that, and so far he has a pretty sparkling track record in that regard. So
Yeah,
it's definitely something to monitor, but definitely an exciting thing.
Yeah, like also, real quick on the point of like team dynamics, he was just like thrown in, right? Like halfway through the season, the team was constructed. He didn't have, an off season to work through some of this stuff. So he was just thrown in, and I'll be eager to see sort of how things play out once he has an off season to prepare. I saw an article from Jeremy Rutherford over at the Athletic, where he I haven't really read it all yet, but the headline is that Drew Bannister has prioritized this offseason. He has prioritized getting to know the players, and not just with regards to hockey, but just getting to know them personally, which I think could be really effective, from like a leadership standpoint, to really know who you're leading and who you're working with. So I think that, with an offseason to prepare, I'm excited to see what impact Drew Bannister can have. Do you want to cover your last one?
Yeah, I think the last one we'll go over here is a big one for just Blues hockey in the past couple years, especially in the Berube era, unfortunately, is the special teams. And that was maybe the worst record on Berube's like resume as the Blues head coach. So as a whole, for like season end stats, the Blues finished with an 18% power play percentage. That is not good. That is bottom 10, and it was not exciting to watch. Last year, more middle of the pack in terms of penalty kill, 79.1 percentage. That's about average, although you'd really like to see it above 80%. But we definitely saw an increase in special teams ability under Bannister. as their penalty kill was just, or their power play, excuse me, was just anemic under Berube. It was under 10% during his time, and now under Bannister, gosh, 2B coaches is really getting me here. Went from 25th in the league all the way up to 11th under Bannister at a 26.7 power play percentage, which is a totally fine mark. A 26.7 should be, around a top 10 unit. Last year it was 11th, but that's especially for a retooling team. That's something you can really hang your hat on and totally be fine. Yeah. So will the special teams continue at the rate we saw last year? Or is it going to still be another woe of these 2020s Blues teams? I guess we'll have to wait and see how Bannister coaches, but I also do think in the discussion of talking about the special teams, I am actually somewhat hopeful for their ability on the power play because of some young guys and Bannister's record so far, and so as well our ability on the penalty kill with some of the offseason moves we've made, signing guys like the Joseph brothers, Radek Faxa, and Kasperi Kapanen, bringing him back. He was a valuable special teams player. Alexandre Texier has played some special teams for the Blue Jackets, and the analytics aren't bad on him. So I really like how these units line up, and I'm really hopeful for them. But it's definitely a point of contention for this season, as if the special teams are just terrible and revert back to being bottom 10 in both categories, then this team doesn't really have the 5-on-5 juice to, compete with a lot of the best teams, especially within our own division. So I'm really hoping that and think that Bannister can put together a solid effort from our boys.
Yeah, I hope so. It was like you said, such a big, a big factor last season. To come back though, like from such a poor start on special teams, what did you say, like 25th, I believe is what you said?
26th, I think.
26th on the power play. To come back and
there was a time where we were last in the league.
Yeah, and I think the penalty kill before now I'm doing it, before Bannister was hired, was like pretty close to the bottom, I believe. I have to check that for sure, but to improve to where they ended up at the end of the season, that requires a pretty high clip of play, I think. So yeah, like you said, I mean, if you wanted to know how the Blues played on a certain night, understanding how their special teams performed would give you a pretty good idea. So I hope they can continue, like you said, that positive trajectory that they showed last season, and that could be a huge X factor for them.
It feels like there should be an okay floor for special teams. It feels like, knock on wood, but it really, everything about this offseason feels like the special teams should be at least fine, which would be very good. And there's really an ability to overachieve and maybe even be great, especially on the penalty kill. I'd say there's a lot more high-end upside. But that's how you can really overperform your win totals and expected winning games and such, because scoring, going ahead 2-0 off of 2 penalties, or scoring a shorthanded goal in the first or second period, can really take the wind out of even a good team's sails. And it's a way that perhaps a team with not as high expectations can be scrappy and can really put together an impressive season. So I'm hopeful.
Me too. I think they're capable. It's just a matter of getting it done for sure. So those are some of the biggest variables, biggest X factors this season. Alec and I are going to continue to provide you guys regular, off-season content as we ramp up. Like we said, we've got 2 months left, so we're going to try to keep this weekly episode schedule going. We've got some fun ideas in the works as we are approaching the start of the season. We're hoping to have some guests on, maybe even some familiar guests. And we're also looking to maybe even do a giveaway soon. So stay tuned for that. If you want to hear more about that, you're going to have to check out our social media, and then tune back into our episodes. So if you want to like this video, we really appreciate that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Rate our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So we'll, if you want to, hear more about some of the stuff that we're working on, you'll have to follow along in one of those ways. Real quick before we go, if you tuned in a few weeks ago to one of our episodes, you will remember that it was I was podcasting in a natural disaster, and there was a huge storm. We made a little video. If you haven't seen it, head over to our Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at Note News Pod to check it out. If you want to see something funny, check it out on TikTok. It's at 99,000 views. So if you want to help us get to 100K, we'd really appreciate that. So that's sort of popping off over there, and that's always fun to see. But like I said, we can be found on all those platforms. So follow along with us. We really appreciate it. That'll do it for us today. We'll see you next time on Note News. And as always, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.